Hello and welcome to the module Aquinas and Thomism. St. Thomas Aquinas was an Italian theologian and Dominican friar who lived in the 13th century, the middle years of the 13th century, born around 1225 and he died around 1275. Aquinas is often regarded as one of the most influential theologians of the Christian tradition. He's sometimes thought of as a quintessentially Catholic theologian, but in fact Aquinas' influence over Protestant theology, particularly in recent decades, has been very considerable as well. And he is very important because he is the great synthesizer of earlier theological and philosophical traditions. And Aquinas draws together so much Platonic and Neoplatonic philosophy, Aristotelian philosophy, and Christian teaching of various kinds into a great synthesis of teaching, a great synthesis of theology and philosophy. So he is, as it were, a pivotal thinker within the Christian theological and philosophical tradition, and this module provides an overview of Aquinas' thought, a study of later traditions of what we call Thomism, so those traditions that emerge out of the thought of Thomas himself, and the opportunity for students to take one or two topics and examine those in much more detail. So we start with an examination of Aquinas' understanding of the nature of theology. So we look at the beginning of his great work, the Summa Theologiae, the Summary of Theology, written largely in the 1260s. It's 60 volumes long in the facing translation with the Latin on one side, the English on the other. Very, very lengthy work, apparently for beginners in theology. And we study just the first few pages of that, examining what Aquinas meant by theology, what he calls sacra doctrina, or holy teaching, and how this relates to what he calls that theology which is ranked as part of philosophy, what we might call philosophical theology. We then move on to look at Aquinas' doctrine of God, his understanding of God's simplicity, eternity, omnipotence, because this is crucial for setting up much later debates in Christian theology and philosophy. And then we examine in quite a bit of detail a crucial part of Aquinas' thought, namely his understanding of theological language and his understanding of analogy. We often think of analogy as simply a category, a linguistic category. In fact, we learn in this module that analogy is also an ontological category. It's a way of understanding existence and creation's relation to God's existence in what was later to become known as the analogia entis, or the analogy of being. So we look at that in Aquinas. We also then move on to look more specifically at Aquinas' teaching on the Trinity, his teaching on virtue and grace, which is very important for understanding later Catholic debates, particularly in the 20th century. All the way through the module, we study through engagement with primary texts in English translation, although a study of the Latin is also possible and very, very welcome. Thank you.